Sometimes a story unfolds in a way that nobody sees coming, and what happened this past weekend in NASCAR is exactly that kind of story. It started as something most people were not taking seriously, almost like a sideshow that had no business being on the main stage. But by the time the checkered flag dropped on Saturday, the entire tone of the conversation had shifted in a way that genuinely surprised even the most seasoned voices in the sport. People who had been loudly critical just hours earlier were sitting in front of cameras essentially admitting they had been wrong. And the way it all played out was not smooth, not polished, and definitely not what anybody had scripted in their heads going into the weekend. Before Cleetus McFarland ever turned a wheel at Rockingham Speedway, the pressure surrounding him was already enormous. Kyle Petty had gone on record with some sharp criticism, arguing that NASCAR should not be handing National Series rides to internet personalities who had not earned their way through the traditional ladder system. His point was about protecting the integrity of competition, and honestly, a lot of people in and around the sport agreed with him at the time. When you looked at the resume, there were a handful of Arca Series starts in 2025, and a tough Daytona Truck Series debut, where things went sideways early. And yet, here he was, strapped into the number 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. That gap between his experience level and the ride he was given is exactly what fueled the skepticism. Rodney Childers said it would take a miracle for him to even finish the race. Travis Cable admitted he wanted to keep as much distance from him on track as possible. The doubts were not just coming from fans scrolling through social media either. These were respected insiders voicing real concerns about what could go wrong. Before the main event even arrived, Cleetus lined up for the Arca Menard Series East race, driving the number 30 car for Rod Jones Racing. This ended up being the first small signal that maybe the weekend was not going to go the way most people assumed. He qualified 7th, ran a clean race, stayed on the lead lap, and held his own in battles with drivers like Isaac Kitson-Miller and Connor Hall. When incidents collected Max Reeves and Gavin Bosley, he was in position to capitalize, and he brought the car home in 4th place. That was his first top 5 finish in any NASCAR-sanctioned race, and you could feel the atmosphere around him shift just slightly. His teammate George Siciliano finished 9th, and Tristan McKee won the race to go back-to-back on the young season. But what people will probably remember most from that Arca race was the moment after it ended, when Cleetus dedicated the run to Greg Biffle and talked about just turning left for Greg. There was real emotion in it, and the narrative around the whole weekend quietly changed from this being a joke to at least being something worth watching with open eyes. Then came the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, and this is where everything got genuinely complicated. He started 35th, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. had told him beforehand not to try to be a hero, just survive and learn. By lap 4, 3 wide into turn 1, he threw the car in, got completely sideways, and somehow managed to save it without collecting anyone. It was the kind of moment that draws gasps because it was both impressive and alarming in equal measure. That sequence basically defined the entire race that followed. There were real flashes of instinct and car control, but there was also a significant amount of overdriving, which is almost inevitable for someone at his experience level stepping into that environment. On lap 49, Blake Lothian spun directly in front of him, and he barely avoided disaster. Pit road speeding penalties piled up. Half spins happened multiple times. Tire wear became a serious issue from pushing too hard in the early going. At the end of stage 1, he was 35th, 1 lap down. By stage 2, he was 33rd and 2 laps down. And then came the moment that probably best captured the entire story of his day. He worked his way up to running 26th, which was the best he had run all afternoon. And then he overdrove a corner on lap 206 and spun, bringing out a caution. The speed was not quite there yet, but the hunger and the emotion were absolutely real. What changed the entire conversation, though, was what happened after that spin. He kept going. Through all of it, he stayed in the race, kept his head down, and kept learning. He finished the race 30 seconds behind and 6 laps down, but he completed all 250 laps. He did not destroy the car. He did not wreck anyone. He did not become the kind of obstacle on the racetrack that everyone had feared he might be. At a track like Rockingham, which punishes mistakes relentlessly, that matters more than the lap count suggests. Danny Lawrence from RCR acknowledged afterward that they still had a lot to improve on. and that NASCAR might want to see another race before clearing him for super speedways like Talladega or Daytona. They had not even managed to execute a proper live pit stop during the race, so internally the team understood this was far from a perfect performance. And then came the biggest twist of the entire weekend, the one that nobody fully saw coming. Kyle Petty, the same person who had said before the race that Cleetus did not belong out there, came on air after it ended and said that if you are going to criticize, you have to give credit when credit is due. He acknowledged that Cleetus had run every lap, stayed out of the way, and not torn anything up. And then he said Cleetus had smacked him in the face and shut his mouth. That is not a minor adjustment to a previous opinion. That is a complete reversal, stated plainly and publicly. Justin Allgaier, the 2024 Series champion, said Cleetus had done exactly what he needed to do and that he had no issue racing around him at any point during the day. Mark Martin pointed out just how difficult Rockingham is as a venue and said getting through that entire weekend at Cleetus's level of experience says a great deal about what he brought to the table. Even the advice Dale Earnhardt Jr. had given him before the race turned out to be exactly right, because surviving and learning was precisely what happened. Cleetus himself was honest about it in a way that was hard not to respect. He said it was the hardest thing he had ever done in his life. He said he felt like he had spun 50 times and nearly crashed 10 times. He admitted that somewhere in the middle of the race, he realized he was completely in over his head and that he started following Jesse Love's lines through the corners because he could see that his own approach had been wrong the entire time. That is genuine self-awareness and real-time learning happening under enormous pressure. Across both races on Saturday, he completed 369 out of 375 total laps, which is not something that happens by luck. So, what does all of this actually mean for where things go from here? The conversation has changed, and it has changed significantly. He did not show up and run competitive lap times. He was not challenging for stage points or threatening anyone at the front. But he proved he can survive at this level, that he can absorb information mid-race and apply it, and that he can handle the weight of enormous public scrutiny without falling apart or taking out half the field in the process. Talladega is now genuinely on the table, with Cleetus himself already making comments about seeing everyone there in 2 weeks. But NASCAR is expected to look at the situation carefully, and the possibility of running another intermediate track first before clearing him for a super speedway is very much part of the discussion. That measured approach is the right one, because what Rockingham showed was not that he is ready for the biggest stages in the sport, but rather that he belongs in the conversation about what comes next. And that distinction is enormous when you consider where the conversation started on Friday. He walked into this weekend being told he had no business being there by people whose opinions carry real weight in the garage. He walked out of it with those same people saying they were wrong. That does not happen often in NASCAR, and it did not happen because everything went perfectly. It happened because he did the unglamorous, grinding, difficult work of staying in the race and learning every single lap. Even when it was messy, and even when it was clear he had a long way to go. Surviving was step 1. Being competitive will be step 2. But step 1 turned out to be harder and more meaningful than almost anyone expected it to be.